Our parents and grandparents probably used tillers, weed killers, and insecticides in their garden. And honestly, that was a way to get the job done. It made their lives a lot easier. But there is another older way of gardening that Rosita and I stumbled onto about 10 years ago. And it's known as regenerative farming or regenerative gardening. I should say that my mom did not use insecticides or weed killers or pesticides. Her pesticide of choice was her bored kids picking off the potato bugs by hand. So we say she was crunchy before crunchy was cool. But anyway, I know a lot of you probably grew up with that kind of gardening. So today we want to talk a little bit about what's the difference and why even bother with regenerative gardening. We hardly ever call it regenerative gardening. What do we call it, Petey?
We just call it gardening.
We just call it gardening.
No-till. I know we've talked about no-till.
Right.
No dig.
And so what we share today is probably barely going to scratch the surface on that. And we're not experts. Mm-hmm. We've done it for 10 years, but we have a lot to learn, and we learn a little bit more every year.
I would say that we've kind of picked our battles as we've gone along. We haven't stuck to all the tenets of regenerative gardening. Right. I mean, we still use plastic in places. Usually if I make a new bed, I will till. We kind of pick and choose what works for us, I guess. Mm-hmm. So I would say just start somewhere and don't worry too much about perfection.
Right.
You'll learn as you go. If you'd like a little more information on how we go about, planning our gardens and even how we work all of this stuff out, we do have an online gardening class that's available. We'll put a link in the description. It's for beginning gardeners. If you've gardened a couple of years, there's a lot of practical stuff in that gardening class that could be helpful.
It's sort of geared towards side hustlers. Like if gardening is not your full-time job, it still isn't our full-time job. So it's kind of geared towards gardening in the margins, evenings and weekends and that kind of thing. So one of the first parts of regenerative gardening is to eliminate plastics as much as possible. And until you start gardening, you don't realize how much plastic is just everywhere. We don't do this perfectly, trust me. But we do try to use soil blocks to start our seeds. I do that for two reasons. One, it saves space under my grow lights. And for two, then it also cuts down on plastic a little bit. But then the truth is, we also have used 10-20 trays ever since we've started. We try to reuse those trays every year. And we start out strong with that, but then we kind of... I say it's you need to save your own sanity as well. So we do what we can.
Correct.
And then I often bump up my little soil blocks into a plastic tray to keep growing them on if I need to.
Another part of regenerative farming is no-till, and I mean, it is what it sounds like. You don't till your beds. I think when we first heard of that, we just thought, well, how can you? Because we have clay soil and it's going to compact. Mm-hmm. But the philosophy is feed your soil and, add nutrition, add organic matter, and the soil will improve over time. Mm-hmm. A healthy soil is your best defense against bugs, disease, stuff like that.
And when you till it, you're disturbing the ecosystem of the soil. You want to protect that as much as you can.
Right. Now, that being said, I did till the first year when I made my beds because I had invasive weeds. I had violets and some kind of grass that just would not die. And so tilling chopped up the roots and made things small and manageable, and I went through and raked and got all of that stuff out. I haven't tilled since, and the beds are doing great. I have gone through with some of the beds and gave them a little bit of I call it forking, but what would be the proper term?
Yeah, you loosen them up.
Yeah, you're just loosening the soil. You're not turning it over, you're just loosening it. No-till also means that you can make permanent paths, and so that cuts down on labor. You're not, every year having to refigure your beds or your garden. I mean, you lay it down once and you're done unless you want to change things. And I feel like in the long run, it makes it easier for one person to manage a bigger space, if you do no-till.
And if you have those paths set in place, you can get out into your garden a lot earlier in the spring. You don't have to wait until it's dried out enough to till it or whatever. You just walk right out and plant into your beds.
And then for weed management on no-till, people are like, well, you till to kill the weeds. Yes, you do. But you can also manage those by covering with a mulch or something like that. And then you just keep adding compost, mulch on top of each other. and it improves the soil, and you have less and less weeds as the years go on.
Right. I like to think that it cuts down on work, but I'm not always so sure about that because it might cut down on weeding a little bit, but it's a lot of mulching and composting and whatever too. Whereas, I mean, my mother-in-law just tills her garden and it's once a week and she's done, and I think it's kind of easy. I don't know. But
that is true.
But I do stick to it because I want better soil, and I can tell a big difference in my plants just because the soil is healthier, I think.
But you also, I think once the plants get, at least this is how it is in my garden, once the plants get big enough, they shade out the soil and a lot less weeds grow midsummer. So the beginning of the year, there probably is a little more work than if you just did tilling.
Right. Another part of regenerative gardening can be cover crops. We have not experimented with that a lot. I have grown, what have I done? Buckwheat, and I accidentally did either wheat or rye last year when I used straw in my garden. And I just sowed a bumper crop of one of those. I'd like to know more about this. I'd like to try it more. That's an excellent way to improve your soil, but also once you terminate that crop, there's different ways of doing that. I won't get into it because we haven't done it, but that can become your mulch that you plant into as well. So that takes a bit of strategic planning, and I haven't got to that level of gardening yet, but I do want to try that. I'm using buckwheat this year as a cover crop in my garden.
So speaking of mulch, we do use a lot of mulch and compost in this type of gardening. Leaf mulch and wood chips specifically are good for like pathways if you don't want to use like landscape fabric. I have a few, I have some areas where my pathways are wood chips, but I'd love to eventually have all of my pathways be wood chips. We also use landscape just to start out with, to form all the paths. It does a good job in keeping down the weeds, and you don't have to worry too much about it. It doesn't, like the water can penetrate, so water won't be sitting, in different places in the garden. So those do work, and I mean, they're plastic, so, it's not necessarily regenerative, but I do eventually hope to replace those with something better. And then as far as like our garden beds where our plants are growing, those we like to cover with grass clippings. We'll do it in the fall after we've cleared the beds so that they're ready to plant in the spring. And then after we plant, we'll just maybe top up with fresh grass or whatever clippings we have to suppress weeds until the plants are big. The edges of the beds, you'll have to go through and weed periodically. And every once in a while, you'll see a giant weed, coming up through the middle of a bed that you missed. So it's not perfect. I think you do have to keep after it if you're going to keep them weeded. Compost also has the benefit of improving the structure of your soil. I find it very beneficial because I have a lot of clay in my soil, and I feel like the compost I've added has loosened it. So I can tell like the top 3 or 4 inches already are better than they were when I began.
You can also compost in place. We learned about that a few years ago. It's called the lasagna method. Basically, to make your own compost, you need an equal mix of nitrogen and carbon. It's equal, right, Petey?
I'm not quite sure.
I'm not quite sure.
Typically a little bit more nitrogen than carbon.
Probably. So like grass clippings would be nitrogen and shredded up leaves would be carbon. That's what we've often used. You just layer those on your beds in the fall. I would do the leaves first and then the grass clippings after to mat it down. We've also used, when we had a surplus of like cilantro or something, use that for the green, the nitrogen. Beautiful soil to plant into. That just breaks down over winter and becomes part of the soil. So that's a low budget, low stress way to get some compost on your garden. So if you decide to do regenerative gardening, you'll get to be friends with the bugs like we are. I used to think all bugs were bad, and then I learned that no, there's actually a lot of good guys, and you want the good guys in your garden. You don't. One of the negatives of spraying pesticides is it kills all the bugs or it keeps them all at bay. But if you don't kill off the good guys, they will help to keep the bad bugs in check. Who are the good guys? Oh, you're not going to believe this, but the spiders, ladybugs, assassin bugs. If you've never seen one of those, Google them. They look terrifying. Green lacewings, and then there's a bunch more as well. I've dabbled a little bit into nematodes. I have a bad problem with wireworms, or I had a bad problem in my potatoes and carrots, all my root crops. And I found that you can get nematodes for wireworms, and I plant them once or twice a year, and I have seen very little since doing that. I just bought them off of Amazon, of all things. I'll leave a link below. But you want to buy from a reputable source. It was one of the main suppliers was selling them through Amazon, so got them that way. So say you have an infestation of something and you need to get rid of it. You can't wait for the good guys to come find your garden and do their job. We have used neem oil. That is, you can get organic neem oil, but that doesn't mean it's without its risks. It can also harm the good bugs as well, like the pollinators, honeybees, and that kind of thing. So if you do use neem oil, what have we used those for, Rosita? We've used them for Japanese beetles.
Yes. Anything that was chewing up the dahlias. I know we always had problems with our dahlias.
Some of the cucumber beetles.
Right. One thing with that is just spray it later in the day, like when most of the good stuff is, not buzzing anymore. Like
at dusk or whenever, when the honeybees have gone to bed, do the spray. Yeah. And then like the rain will wash it off, so you have to keep applying it. But then another thing that we've recently discovered is you can use molasses as an insecticide, of all things. And it doesn't kill any bugs, but what it does is it actually raises the Brix level of a plant so that it's too sweet for the bugs to chew on it. I started doing this 2 years ago on my dahlias, and I did actually notice, I think I noticed a difference. We have every bug, we have every bug known to man here in Arkansas. And some that men don't even know about, I think. And my dahlias did actually pretty good last year. They weren't so chewed up. So I'm actually planning to take a granular molasses and put it in the soil when I plant my plants, make it systemic, basically. And then also I'll do foliar sprays as well.
A few disclaimers here at the end. If you wait until you can do this perfectly, you're probably not going to do it at all. Mm-hmm. So we just say again, start where you are, do what you can, add a little bit by little bit, change a few practices this year, add to that. I would say it took us a couple of years too to just kind of switch things over. There can be a lot of shade thrown, a lot of judgment in this area. Like I feel like it's easy to cast aspersions on people who we don't think are doing it properly. Don't worry about that. Like do the best you can where you are with what you have.
Yeah.
It's okay. The goal is to have healthy soil and healthy gardeners, and you can get there, bit by bit. We try to limit plastic, but like I mentioned earlier, we have plastic landscape paths, and we use 10-20 trays. At the end of the season, when I'm starting plants and I'm desperate, I often use the plastic inserts, and I don't reuse those. So, that's not very regenerative. I'm hoping this year, if things go well, I can do more bumping up into soil blocks instead of into those inserts. When we sprayed our roses in our old garden, I don't think either of us have roses yet, but we're getting them hopefully. We did use just the chemical spray that David Austin recommends. I think it's a BioAdvance spray of some sort. So that's not organic. That's not good for you. But I typically don't grow that around the roses. We just kind of grow by themselves. So, and LaRonda still tills, I think, one corner of her garden every spring. Is that right, LaRonda?
That's right.
Yeah.
It's just the path of least resistance.
I think the path of least.
Yeah.
That's what I was going to say. So, do it imperfectly and keep adding practices that are good as you can.
Yeah.
I think it's a thing that we can experiment with, and we can look at it with a positive view instead of saying, oh, I can't do this, so I'm not even going to try.
Right.
No, do try.
And the reason to do it is to eliminate a lot of the chemicals that we're exposed to, because we're in the garden a lot. Mm-hmm. And if there's children in the garden, I don't want them exposed to stuff that isn't good for them either.
It's actually how we started. Was we had a bunch of nieces and nephews going through the garden picking stuff, and sometimes they'd pop something in their mouth.
Eating stuff.
And neither of us wanted them to be sticking terrible things into their mouths. Right. So that was what kind of started us on this path.
And I think any time that we work with nature, instead of taking a heavy hand, spraying pesticides or whatever, it's just going to be better in the long run. So if we learn how nature works best and then try to come along as kind of just working with how it works best. I'm not very profound there, but
it's working as it's intended to work.
Right.
And we're just doing our bit to help it.
We don't have to reinvent the wheel. Let's just do it how it likes to happen. We barely scratched the surface. If you have more things that you do than what we mentioned, we'd love to hear about them. What some changes you've made in your garden. You can leave us a comment below.